and welcome. A very good evening to all you viewers. I'm Afrida Rahman Ali, and today we are going to focus on an extremely important issue that concerns the citizens of this country. The Indian unit of Johnson & Johnson buried facts and findings on faulty hip replacement systems that it imported and sold in India. Over 3,600 patients with faulty implants remain untraceable till today, and at least 4 deaths have been reported from those who underwent surgeries using these devices. This has been disclosed, viewers, by a report prepared by the Union Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, and in fact the report also states that Johnson & Johnson did not inform the national regulator, that is the Central Drugs Standard Control Organization, about the exact number of patients who use these devices. Also, it did not inform about the adverse reports following such surgeries or the corrective operations that were subsequently conducted. It also, mind you, did not provide any compensation to those affected by the faulty replacements. The committee was set up on the 8th of February 2017 and the report submitted on 19th of February this year. The government is yet to implement any of the recommendations. We will discuss this entire issue. First, let's listen in to Dr. A.K. Agarwal on how this entire controversy came about.
After looking into the design of the implant, plus the approval of FDA, which is supposed to be supreme approval as regards perception is concerned, they started doing it, and quite a good number of orthopedic surgeons were doing the hip implant. In due course of time, it was observed that not immediately after operation, but a gap of 1 year, 2 years, that there is some sort of problem. And then when the patient came back, then our clinicians realized that there is some sort of problem of erosion of the surface of the joint that leads to painful joint or restriction, and that is why some of the cases who reported to their clinicians, they were worked up, and some of them underwent revision surgery also. Meanwhile, when our clinicians reported this sort of event, and internationally also this was reported, so Johnson & Johnson decided to call it back, and they called it back in abroad, they called it back in India also. And gradually, when we found that there is such type of problem, the Johnson & Johnson company, in their wisdom, announced in newspaper also, and I think they opened a website or some portal where anybody who has undergone this implant can get registered and will be examined clinically. If found suitable, it will be subjected for revision surgery or any medical treatment or whatever it is.
Okay, joining me here on the program, Mr. Vijay Agarwal of the BJP, joining us from Delhi. Dr. K.K. Agarwal, former president of the IMA, joining us from New Delhi again. Bijon Mishra, consumer expert and also member of the PhD Chamber of Commerce, joining us from Delhi. Vijay Vajhala, who is a victim, and also he is in fact a former product manager at a medical devices company. He was the first, in fact the only patient to have testified before the committee that the government formed to find out about the discrepancies in the implants that were so imported and sold in India. I welcome all my guests to the show. First of all, I would like to put things in context for our viewers before I put across my first question, just to understand how serious this is for the consumer. Now, remember, we just heard Dr. Agarwal as well. Now, this is the kind of thing, these kind of faulty implants can actually render you immobile for life. Remember, there are 3,600 people out there who are untraceable at the moment. We don't know what their condition is. Neither the government nor the regulator has any information about these patients. Only 1,037 people have registered, and they are the ones who are likely to get some amount of respite, some remedial measure for the faulty implants. Now, this is the condition. My first question goes across to Vaibhav Agarwal. Mr. Agarwal, the government has taken note of the situation. I understand there's a committee set up. There is a report submitted in February this year, and there were certain recommendations made. What has happened after that? Absolutely no action taken by the government, either in tracing those patients who are out there who have not registered or in giving any kind of compensation.
Frida, so what has happened is that the government first took a suo motu note on it, established a committee of which of which the medical community is a part of, and yes, we are in the process of finalizing the terms and conditions under which the Johnson & Johnson as an organization can actually be pressurized to make sure that the compensation realm of Johnson & Johnson that happened in 2013 in the US, when the 8,000 patients were awarded $2.5 billion in compensation, and probably the committee still doubts that they haven't paid because Johnson & Johnson did not have clear responses given to the committee with respect to the compensation paid so far.
Yes.
So we are in the process of establishing a proper framework in terms of making sure that by 2025 the compensation gets taken care of to all the patients. You know, it is not an easy task. 8-year-old medical records, and we are talking about a time when this was also not digitized. It was only in this government when we started digitizing patient records, and we've also issued guidelines to government hospitals and private hospitals to do digitization of that. So IMA is also helping us do that. And you know, so it's a little difficult task to trace all the 4,700 patients who are using these faulty products as of now. But I also learned that about 1,030 or so patients are registered already, who have the faulty parts, and they are out of which 700 are being monitored by the surgeons itself.
Absolutely. But let me add here, you know, you may go with that figure of 1,032, but out of them only 254 patients have received the revised surgeries, which means the corrective measures have been taken only for 254 patients, and there are a lot of discrepancies. We'll go into all that, the findings of the committee that your government set up. But I want to bring in Mr. Bijon Mishra. Mr. Bijon Mishra, what I find startling is that, you know, the Johnson & Johnson, of course, did not inform the Indian government. The fact that already the Australian government had recalled its product even before it had registered in India, because let's just tell our viewers also here that Johnson & Johnson got registration certificate for its ASR hip replacement implants from the CDSCO, which is of course the drug regulatory body here in India. It did not inform at that time that Australia had already withdrawn these implants. So that is a level of ignorance. I mean, who do we hold responsible here, Mr. Mishra? Is Johnson & Johnson responsible, or the drug monitoring body in India also should have been proactive and should have done some background checks?
You see, the report of the committee is very transparent and clear. I must first congratulate the present government for taking up this issue.
Yes.
You see, this issue wasn't in limelight at all till the patients, you know, who had gone to the court, who had been corresponding with Johnson & Johnson, who were not being heard. You know, all these issues came up to the health ministry, and then the health ministry decided to have an expert group. And you heard Dr. Agarwal, who was the head of the expert group, mention about how the processes took place. Now, coming to the onus, there are two sets of stakeholders who are responsible. Number one is the manufacturer. Number two is the medical physician who implants these equipments in the patients.
Okay.
These are the two people who are completely aware about the numbers, who are completely aware about who the patients are, and they're completely aware about the outcomes of such implants in those patients. So there are two people who need to be made responsible, and they are the ones who should have reported to the drug regulator, who had given permission and approval for use on patients in India. And when globally this outcry happened, then naturally, it trickled down to India. And when it trickled down to India, the patients are quite aware about their rights these days.
Yes.
So they all raised their voice in terms of why was the government quiet, what is happening in our country.
Now we have a case study with us right now, live.
Absolutely,
Yes.
Frida,
we have,
Frida,
yes, Vaibhav, I'll come
Frida,
back to you.
Before
okay, go ahead.
Just give me a second. Just to add on to what Bejanda is saying, he is absolutely right. It is absolutely the government's responsibility. And one of the biggest lapses that I will tell you about issues of corruption, very, very profound corruption here, is that when the medical regulator here in India back in 2009 was issuing fresh registration certificates of this product in India back in 2009, please mark my date, the Johnson & Johnson, the same company, recalled the same product across the Australian market.
That's what I mentioned. That's what I said.
No provision of
but your drug regulatory body should also have been proactive, sir.
This is mind-blowing.
No, but your drug regulatory body also had some responsibility to do some background checks. You are putting the entire onus on Johnson & Johnson, who probably in their own business interest did not make a full disclosure. I agree. But what was your CDSCO doing? Why didn't they have the relevant information?
Renewal, right?
No, absolutely.
Okay,
you are right. You are absolutely right.
But the relevant information was right in the record.
Right.
So the record with the regulator was relevant, right?
The regulator.
Why were they allowed to register if the drug regulatory body already had the information?
We instituted an investigation in it.
I know, but you did that much later. We are talking about 2009 and 2010 when actually the registry in India happened. Before that, there were discrepancies, which is why we are asking, sure, Johnson & Johnson did not make a full disclosure,
so
but why didn't the drug regulator also have the information? Absolutely. Let me bring in Mr. Vijay Vajhala. Now, Mr. Vijay Vajhala, I would like to remind our viewers, is one of the victims. He is going to give us the consumer point of view here because he has undergone the revision surgery. He is one of those who deposed before the committee that was set up by the government. Let's speak to Vijay Vajhala, who is with us live. Welcome to the broadcast, Mr. Vajhala. I would like you to share with us your experience. What did you go through? What happened? And what exactly are the discrepancies?
See, life is simply, I can say we just feel like we are in hell. Right, and time and again I have been writing it. What I would like to differ with Mr. Vaibhav Agarwal, that government took a suo moto. Government didn't suo moto, and I'm not against this government. What they have done is definitely great, but it took 4 years for me to make them realize, like, what is happening on the ground level. Where is the waterlogging? What is the level of corruption here, and why people are not taking cognizance of this matter? I might have written hundreds of mails to PMO, Health Ministry, CIDISCO, DCGI, Maharashtra government, police, CBI, everyone. Like, why there is a delay in the entire investigation process.
Right. Mr. Vaibhav Agarwal, would you like to respond? The fact is that Mr. Vajhala is not alone here. There are thousands of other patients out there. Perhaps even ignorant that they have taken a faulty implant.
Okay, so I'll tell you what, there are two steps to this, and I can be corrected. I'm not an expert.
Mr. Mishra, just hold on. Let Mr. Vaibhav Agarwal respond. I'll come to you, Mr. Bijon Mishra. Just hold on for a second. Yes, Vaibhav Agarwal, please.
So when I look at the entire timeline, Johnson & Johnson played really dirty on this. When 2006 they applied for a license, until that time they did not import the material. Then 2009 they applied for a renewal, and then 2010 they imported. And see, the license condition, when you apply for a license with the regulator, they ask you whether the product, and they ask you to submit an affidavit to that respect. So they ask you whether the product has received complaint in any region of the world. In 2009, just before the complaints started coming in Australia, that is when the timing of the license was granted. Now, yes, I may have taken the complete credit from Mr. Vajhala. I would not want to take it, even if he wants to say that the government has not taken suo moto action in it. But I would like to bring this to everyone's notice that this is the first time that a government in the ruling as the ruling dispensation has taken an action of this nature in the history of independent India. And yes, it would have been slow. Yes, Vijay had to write 100 letters. I totally agree to it. Unfortunately, that's the system we are fighting.
No, but we haven't seen any action after the recommendations have come in, Mr. Agarwal. Unfortunately, no compensation have been announced so far. No punitive action has been announced so far. Yes, Mr. Mishra, please go ahead.
Compensation has been announced. Punitive action has to be announced, but compensation has been announced to the tune of 20 lakhs per patient.
Okay, Mr. Mishra,
into 4,700 patients, which is the import.
Right. Yes, Mr. Vijay Mishra.
Can I come in?
Please go ahead.
Yeah, you see what I want to add to Mr. Vijay, I want to add to Mr. Vijay is that Mr. Vijay is speaking the reality of today in our country.
Right.
Patients are not heard. There is no kind of a sensitivity towards patients, rights. In our country, we find that the patients are left to the lurch. I know how Vijay is fighting cases in the court of law. I know how difficult time he is going through. You see, and he came and deposed before the committee. I was also a member of that committee. I remember how he was emotionally charged. My contention is, you see, what I want to share with you all, it is high time we change our system in the country. This government wants to change. They have been promising us that, but it is taking a too long a time.
Right.
And Vaibhav
okay, let me bring in my other panelist, Mr. Mishra. Your point well taken. That there is a lot that needs to be done. Whatever has been done is only in terms of getting us a finding of how faulty the devices were and how Johnson & Johnson actually defaulted. We know how the defaulting has happened, but now in terms of concrete action, what can be done? That's the question. Mr. K.K. Agarwal is also with us. Thank you for your patience, sir. But before I go across...
is clear.
Yes, I'll come to you. We'll talk about the recommendations one by one. I have it in front of me. I have the recommendations in front of me. I'll come to you. Thank you for your patience, Mr. Agarwal. I will come across to you. Mr. K.K. Agarwal, President of the IMA, is with us. But before I go across to you, I want to bring in Mohit, who is our reporter and who has the statement that Johnson & Johnson has issued in its defense. I would like to hear from Mohit. Yes, Mohit, if you can go ahead and tell us what has Johnson & Johnson said in its defense? Where does the case stand now? Because I believe the government has also now, in its latest statement, spoken about compensation, etc., to the victims.
Well, certainly, the committee has already recommended a compensation of around 20 lakh rupees, and they've said that an awareness campaign should continue till about 2025.
Yes.
But at the same time, talking about the clarification that has been issued by Johnson & Johnson, it very categorically states that, they have done a lot of things to rehabilitate people. They started an electronic campaign as well, trying to ensure that more of these people who've been implanted with this particular implant, they come out there and they register themselves so that at least proper care can be taken care of them. But at the other side, you have to also listen to these patients and the committee. When we talk about them, they say that at least more than 4,700 people were actually implanted with this particular surgery. And despite it been happening for almost 15 years or so in between, it does seem like it that the registration of the total users was only turned till about 1,000. So what about those 3,600 users? That is something that is under the radar as well.
Right.
So these are the things that have been put forward by the committee, but nevertheless, the recommendations and the clarification given by Johnson & Johnson has to also be kept into the loop.
Right. Mr. K.K. Agarwal, Johnson & Johnson has, of course, issued a statement saying, in all honesty, we were the ones who actually recalled the implants after there were discrepancies. And yes, such kind of technical flaws and, imperfections can happen. So they claim that, on their part, they have everything above board. Now, do you buy that statement? Do you think they're justified in their position?
See, let us understand that these types of withdrawals does happen. Drugs are withdrawn, devices are withdrawn, machineries are withdrawn, pacemakers are withdrawn, and in such cases, when they are withdrawn, they need to be followed, they need to be replaced, they need to be compensated. This is a part of the industry. We can't say that this cannot happen.
Right.
A metal-to-metal type of an implant between 2003 and 2010, 1 million were implanted. Everybody will not get complications. So out of these 4,000, we should not presume that all of them will have complications. Number one, those who get complications, they need to be corrected, they need to be paid. That's one. Number two, what the ministry should do is, there are only selected hospitals in India who do hip transplant. And there will be selected orthopedicians who do hip transplant. They should invite the Indian Orthopedic Society and ask them, all those people who are doing hip transplant, to send them a letter that inform about their patient, that they should inform about to their patients that if this, because they will know which transplant they have done. Metal to metal transplant, they will be able to write to their patients, get their history, and those patients who are getting the following problems, they should report. And those who are not, why make them worry? Because every patient is not going to have complications. Metal to metal hip implants is still being done in those cases where there is no alternative. So a simple circular to the orthopedics doctor that if you have done a metal to metal transplant in the last 10 years, kindly inform your patients to come for a follow-up. And let that follow-up be built to the Johnson & Johnson company. So let's not talk about that after 8 years, 3,000 people still will have problems. All those who had problems may still have gone to their doctor, and their doctor should know that.
Right. Now, Mr. Vijay Vajhala, if I can ask you this question, because we need some clarity here. What Mr. Agarwal just told us, that all those patients who had the implants may not have complaints. But if a product has been withdrawn globally because of certain, discrepancies, isn't it fair that at least every single patient who has taken that implant must mandatorily go through some kind of checks? Otherwise, how will you even identify? Because do you believe that there could be a number of those patients out of those 3,600 who would probably have no complaints, and therefore, the question does not arise of addressing their issue?
See, I have my own saying on this. What Dr. Agarwal is saying, that every patient may not have similar problem what I or few people have, few thousands of people might have, but there is no accountability. There is no identification done so far. There is no company or the government has not done enough to reach out the people. Yes. It is now 8 years, this product is banned, and people, those who are suffering, do not even understand why they are suffering. So what proactive action as a surgeon, Dr. Fraternity has done it, whether they have approached any of the patients. My own doctor did not inform me anything about this.
Right.
Although I was meeting him throughout.
Okay.
Unless until I had to go for my revision surgery, wherein he said, okay, it's your choice what you want to do. That was the simple word. So there is no every doctor is not in the same line, but there has to be an accountability.
Absolutely.
I would urge with the medical fraternity to reach out their patients. They will definitely have the data, and moreover,
that's the problem. We don't have the data. We don't have a database. When we say there are 3,600 patients untraceable, that's a concern here. Because why is it that you don't have a record of all the patients who have undertaken this particular transplant?
Yes, that is what.
Yes, I have another victim. In fact, Mr. Vineet Malhotra is joining us. He's a viewer who has just called in because his mother has been a victim of this. Vineet Malhotra calling from Delhi. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, my mom has undergone one surgery and 2 revisions. There's no answerability, no accountability with Johnson & Johnson. These people need to be taken task to. Criminal action needs to be taken against these people.
So did you register? Did you register with the company? Because they are taking in complaints of those who are having problems with the implant. Have you registered your mom with the Drug Regulatory Authority?
It's not about registration. The problem is what happens to the damage that has been done to her. She's already immobile for 1 year because of this. She's not able to move for 6 months. She's on the bed. Who's responsible for all this trauma? What will the registration do? They'll offer me some money. I can get 5 times the money. Get my mother back in action for 10 years. Who's responsible for this?
Yes. Now,
do you have an answer to that? Does the company have an answer? Does the doctor have an answer? Nobody has an answer. It's not about money. It's not about offering 10 lakhs or 20 lakhs. It's about you playing with lives of people. All these people need to be hanged.
So playing with the lives of people, that's the point that I take from Vineet Malhotra, because this is imagine the kind of impact it will have on your mobility. Your mobility of course is compromised for your entire life, and that is what you've done to thousands of patients because of not taking certain precautions and because certain checks and balances have not been put in place. Mr. Vaibhav Agarwal, at this stage again the government has a huge responsibility. Today of course we understand that there is a statement made by the Union Health Ministry saying committees should be set up by CDSCO and they are going to receive complaints. But a lot of people may not be actually aware. How are you going to go about this? How are you going to address these grievances like we just heard from Mr. Vineet Malhotra?
I think this is a very, very, very grave and a very sad situation in India, where we are embarking on a journey of 22nd century from the 21st century, and we are still reeling with problems like these. I think Dr. K.K. Agarwal really rightly pointed out that it's not going to be too difficult to work with the medical fraternity overall, and it's just a matter of getting a framework in place at the ministry level, giving guidelines to the regulator, asking them to set up a helpline, of course, but asking them also to work with the medical fraternity, and Dr. K.K. Agarwal has pointed it out very rightly. And my heart goes out to Vijay because he's on the show right now, but I would like to say that if he needs help in terms of my personal capacity, I'm standing right there. This is mind-blowing. This is mind-blowing, and that's one of the reasons why one shot when you called me on the debate, I jumped onto the topic and said, yes, I want to create a voice for the people here. Thanks to you that you're picking up such an issue. And secondly, I also see that this government is committed towards bringing transparency in the medical system, especially. And why I'm saying that is because we are in the process of automatically digitizing all the records. So, for example, AIIMS, All India Medical Institute, where a large number of people go and visit to get treatments done, already have their records in place. So, there is a beginning there, and I would request all the private sector as well to cooperate, and we've already issued guidelines. Please, let's
there has been a suppression of facts and figures, and that is very serious because there is a deliberate attempt, I'm sorry to say, to suppress facts and figures, perhaps because the corrective measures are expensive, it will take a lot of money for compensation. So somewhere there is a nexus to actually downplay the real figures, which is why only 254 corrective surgeries have been made. The rest have been left to fend for themselves. Yes, I will come across to you, Mr. Vijay Vajhala, but Mr. K.K. Agarwal has been wanting to come in for a long time. Mr. Agarwal first, please. Yes, Mr. K.K. Agarwal.
I just want to make 4 points.
Yes.
Let me make it clear that Medical Council of India only mandates us to keep records only for 3 years. Okay. Therefore, not keeping records may be a problem because no hospital may be keeping a record more than 3 years. That's one. Number two, doctors in India are only relying on the DCGI approval. Doctors will not come to know whether this drug is withdrawn or not. Right. That is only DCGI. Unless the DCGI informs and withdraws, doctor may not be aware about it. Okay. Number three, DCGI may not go with a drug may be approved in one country, may be disapproved in another country. It is a technical advisory board of DCGI who will decide whether to discontinue this drug or not. We cannot say because it is banned in Australia, automatically it gets banned in India because inter-country relevance may be there. Fourth is that any implant which India is importing where we have not done trials, there should be a compulsory surveillance by the government and the hospitals and the doctors for the next 5 years, and that will solve these types of problems. These are the 4 issues which
very
I wanted to raise.
important. Those are the checks and balances, the standard operating procedure that should be in place. Mr. Vijay Vajhala, I will give you the last word. I need to conclude the broadcast. Go ahead, Mr. Vajhala.
See, I have been demanding DCGI, the clinical papers on the very basis which these people have given an approval. It is only because US FDA they have. But what is the regulatory check in India? And second thing, company has no morale. This reports from the expert committee is still on a hold, or it is not made available to the public, right? Or the people like me, those who are suffering, right? And the compensation figure which they are talking about is 20 lakhs or something in that. Like, I have also got through this from the media only. Apart from that, I do not know. I do not have a copy of this. I have demanded the health ministry and DCGI, but they did not give me any report so far. So everything, everything, we are relying on only media. There is no engagement or there is no dialogue happening with the government. That bureaucracy is still going on. So please come down on that. We are human beings. We are not.
And which is why we have taken up this issue, Mr. Vijay Vajhala. The idea is to highlight the plight of patients like yourself who have run from pillar to post perhaps and still not got even a single penny as compensation. The committee has recommended 20 lakh rupees to each patient. But remember, this is a question of your mobility. Remember, so many of them out there had to suffer because Johnson & Johnson had decided to import and sell faulty implant devices to India. Thanks for joining us here on Mirror Now. I thank all my guests for sharing your views with us.